Welcome to Rom Wills Money Matters. Sales are needed for any business. I'm going to tell you what, I don't care what the business is. You in the business of selling. I don't care what it is. If you have products, you definitely selling the products. You know, even if you ain't going out actively, even if you have a brick and mortar store or a kiosk, wherever, or a table at a vending event, you have to sell that product. If you're not selling a product, you still got to sell your service. Even if you know what, you got to sell. All sales is convincing people to buy your product or service. And they need it for any business. You in the business of selling, you got to have something about it. Even if you're doing social media, you still selling the product. Maybe not directly as far as, hey, you got to buy this or buy that or whatever, but you still have to get people to watch your social media. You have to sell yourself in that case. You have to sell what you're presenting. And, you know, it's interesting because I was reading, I forgot who it was. It was one of those success type of books, but I think it was Robert Kiyosaki, the author of Rich Man, Poor Man. And he was talking about, I believe it was that book. It was been years since I read that. But he was talking about how somebody was trying to look down on him for being a salesman. And he had to break them down. It was like, well, hold up. I think they were at a newspaper or something. It was like, well, hold up. The only way you get paid is if I sell ads. Think about it. Like if you look at magazines or anything like that, right? Yeah, it looks good. Somebody wrote something, maybe took some great pictures, but somebody had to sell those ads. I don't care what the business is. You'd be hard pressed to tell me a business you ain't selling the service, you know? And that's one thing I would say I'm very good at selling, because two things I had to sell. One, when I was being a vendor, and I'll get into that in a second, but then also being a salesman at a couple of gyms, maybe 3 gyms. I had to sell memberships and everything. And you know, that's very important. That's very important. Indeed, when you talk about social media now, a lot of people, they selling memberships. They selling memberships. You know, even on YouTube, there's memberships, right? Even on YouTube. But then you have a lot of people that get off of there and they may be on a more private site. They're selling memberships. Sales are needed for any business. I want y'all to think about that. You know, you either had to sell it yourself, especially if you're a solopreneur, or had somebody to sell it. Like even if you have a brick and mortar, say you have a brick and mortar and you selling clothes. That clerk is still selling. Now, I was going to mention something about being a vendor, right? That was very important. When I was a vendor, that was total sales right there. Now, one of the things I did for selling was put myself in a position where people would come over to my table. Like as a vendor, now any one of you vending, please pay attention to what I'm about to say. You know, because one of the mistakes I would see with vendors, one of their business mistakes, they would just sit there and people would just walk by. And I would if I was vending, first of all, only time I sat down was either A, to sign a book, or B, I was eating something. And it was ironic, that's when people would stop by. Maybe I needed to have some food out or something. But I would stand up and people walking by, I would say hi to them. I would say hi. I would, even if they kept walking, you know, and I ain't gonna lie. I had people laugh at the title of my book, Nice Guys and Players. They look at it and laugh. Now, some would come over, some would laugh and keep going, but I'm still in sales mode. Because I'm trying to get people to come over to my table and then buy the book. And, one of the things that you want to do as a salesperson, you want to connect with your customer. That does a lot more than anything. That does a lot more regardless of what you're selling. You want to connect with your customer. I remember when I was working retail at this big department store. I ain't gonna mention the name, but I remember there was a gentleman, I think I mentioned him before, and he was selling men's clothing. And I remember a gentleman came in to buy just a shirt. Now, after the salesman got through, this dude the client purchased like $1,500 worth of clothes. And he was just selling, and I was really paying attention to it because even though I had sales experience, like I've said before, always learn. So I was paying attention to him, and what he did was just, one, connect with the client, but two, when the client would be trying on something, he would go find something. He would find hookups and everything and present it to the client. You learn that. Another way is just to kind of, let them look at some stuff as, talk to them and everything like that. But I don't care where it was. If you have a product, you have to sell it. If you have a service, you even have to sell more. You have to convince that client that you have, you can do a great job for them. Like if you selling clothes someplace, well, you need to be dressed up yourself. You need to look nice yourself. Usually when someone will come into like any type of clothing store or something, I noticed that the sales clerks would generally be good dressed themselves. That was very important. In fact, on my Deep Thought channel, I'm always wearing this African tunic. And I actually bought that, actually got that for a discount at this African store I worked at, because the owner, she had a great point. I needed to look the part. Now, I didn't wear it every single time, but I needed to look the part. Like, you got to think about that. What is your business? What are you selling? If you selling hair, if you're a barber, you selling haircuts. If you have a jacked up haircut, ain't too many people going to like get a haircut from you. You have to think about, what are you selling? If you're selling cars, you need to have a good running car. If you're selling mechanical services, being a mechanic, you need to have it. Whatever, like one of the best ways to sell something is to look good selling it. And then regardless of what you're selling, knowing what you're selling. Like when I was selling books, every single book I sold, I read through it. Even some of the boring ones, I ain't gonna lie. But that way when somebody came and they would ask about it, I could talk with them about it. Because the sales were important. And that's one thing you gotta take in mind. Now, if you're not good at selling yourself, you might have to like finance someone selling it for you. In fact, I remember this, there was this author, and I was at a book signing, and it was like a vending show. Like I said, I've done a ton of them. And there was an author selling his book, but he had a guy with him who was more like the hype man, who could sell the book for him because he wasn't good himself. He even said that he wasn't good himself at selling books, and talking to people like that. But he brought someone with him to sell his book. That's how important it is. And that's something that you always have to keep in mind, all right? Whether you're doing it for yourself, whether you're doing it for someone else, all right? So always keep that in mind, all right? So anyway, y'all know the deal. Let's go make that money.